I don't understand how that's not some form of child endangerment or child abuse already.
And more children are dying after being reunified.
I'm gonna be honest with you. You don't deserve to have that child.
But I should have done more.
But what could you have done?
Ran away with him.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in to our special, The Youngest Fentanyl Victims. I'm King 5 Investigator Kristin Goodwillie. We've been reporting on this very tough topic for months. The high number of babies and toddlers dying and nearly dying in Washington state under CPS supervision. All kinds of child welfare advocates tell us state law that went into effect a few years ago is to blame. The law makes it harder for CPS to remove children from homes even when the parents are overdosing on fentanyl.
How many of you believe that this law is actually killing babies?
I do.
5 foster moms from Western Washington who all have a history of caring for babies born addicted to fentanyl came to King 5 with a message.
There's a big difference between reunification and safe reunification.
And right now, are babies and toddlers safe?
No.
A law aimed at keeping kids out of foster care and with parents is failing.
Do you think this is the biggest safety crisis for children in the system?
I do.
This is House Bill 1227.
In 2021, a state law was passed that makes it easier for parents involved with CPS to keep custody of their children. Representative Lillian Ortiz-Self of Mukilteo spelled out on her website why she sponsored the bill.
It's time that we start looking at the damage and the harm that we're doing, the irrevocable damage and harm that happens when we remove a child from their family.
Prior to the new law, children could be removed from parents and put into foster care when there was evidence of physical harm from abuse or neglect. The new Keeping Families Together Act goes a step further. To remove a child, there must be evidence of imminent physical harm and substance abuse. Even when babies are born affected by highly toxic fentanyl, it isn't enough to take a child away.
We're just setting everyone up for failure and loss and heartbreak.
I'll be honest, I'm angry. I'm angry that anybody thinks it would be okay to hand over a young child to somebody under the influence of a drug that we have all recognized as lethal.
Since the bill passed, the number of children going into foster care has plummeted. Since 2021, down 28%. But look at what happened as more kids were reunified with their families. Deaths and near deaths of children went up by 114%. State records show fentanyl was a major contributor to the increase, with the majority of victims babies and toddlers.
The exact system that was designed to protect these children is traumatizing them further.
And killing them.
And putting them at great risk, yeah.
So how could a baby possibly overdose on fentanyl? They're ingesting it. Police are finding that babies are picking up the pills that look like Skittles and putting them in their mouths. They're also getting their hands on foil or the straws that are used to smoke the fentanyl. And it doesn't take much. The equivalent to a couple grains of salt is enough to kill someone.
It's a reality that we face every day with every child, and it's heartbreaking. It rips at your soul.
It's really scary. Like when I know that the parents are in active use and, kids are going there.
This is one of the victims. 3-year-old Prince of Tacoma was in foster care since he was a baby. Last year, CPS reunified him with his mother. 6 months later, he was dead. His mother is accused of torturing Prince and beating him to death.
It's heartbreaking when you see over and over again that you can't get these kids and their parents back together safely, and how broken that is.
Even the lawmakers realized the Keeping Families Together Act may have gone too far.
This is a unique threat that we've never experienced before.
After hearing about the increase in child deaths, a Senate committee held a public meeting to see what they could do about it. A pediatrician from Olympia said the law needs to be changed.
These toddlers are showing up in our emergency rooms responsive, needing full life support, and we don't know why until we figure out that it's fentanyl. These children are dying.
This is about the children of Washington being protected from adults who are not protecting them.
A month after that hearing, lawmakers were emotional on the House floor, debating whether or not to change the law.
If your child was in a burning building, would you wait until the flames devoured it?
There's days when you can't presume there's good parents. And when these kids are dying of fentanyl, we've got to step in.
How many more children have to die?
We need to change this. You and I need to change this.
After all that, lawmakers did change the law. Now fentanyl must be considered something that puts a child in immediate harm's way. But these foster moms say in practice, it's not enough.
So if nothing happens with this law, what is going to happen?
Kids are going to keep dying, and we're going to see more and more kids die.
Since this story aired in November, DCYF put out new data that shows critical incidents aren't as bad as they projected. But the bottom line is children are still dying. In our next story, we found when children are exposed to deadly fentanyl in their home, instead of putting them in foster care, the state is trying to make their home safer by giving parents a box to lock the drugs up.
Well, and here I have the kids' school records.
Danielle Steele of North Bend has spent the last 10 years gathering evidence, trying to prove she should get custody of her 2 nieces and a nephew, while her sister, the kid's mother, goes to treatment. She says records of fractured bones, burns, and long stretches of missed school days show the kids are in danger.
Showing my nephew missing 52.99 days of school.
You did it! Danielle says an incident in the fall should have been the parents' last chance. Court records show her 3-year-old niece overdosed on tranquilizers.
CPS did not take the children away.
No, they did not, because they said that they did not have enough, there's enough evidence.
While CPS didn't remove the kids from the home, they did give the family a tool aimed at keeping the home safe. A lockbox.
I mean, that is a joke.
The King 5 investigators found early last year, DCYF started giving parents who use drugs like fentanyl lockboxes like this one. And the goal is to keep drugs out of reach so kids don't accidentally eat the pills or powder. But child welfare advocates say that these lockboxes do not account for the highly toxic nature of fentanyl.
That is a true joke, and it's sad. It's so much bigger than that. It's so much bigger than a lockbox.
Even with a lockbox in the home, another crisis happened. 3 weeks ago, Danielle says the kids got their hands on drugs lying around the house.
The kids started getting into it. That's how they found it. And
none of it in a lockbox.
None of it in a lockbox, yeah.
Do you think that you guys are doing this safely?
Yes.
Doreen Perez is an official with the state agency charged with keeping children safe, DCYF.
We certainly think that this is an opportunity to prevent harm. If it's not being provided, then there's no opportunity. And without that, there's no opportunity to try and keep them safe.
DCYF uses several tools to keep kids safe. Services like offering treatment to parents, housing, childcare, parenting classes, social worker visits, and in the last year, a lockbox. Despite these safety nets, kids have suffered dire consequences.
This one right there, he's just beautiful. He's perfect.
Pamela Andrews of Port Townsend took in baby Otis after he was born last Christmas with fentanyl in his system. The CPS safety plan called for the mom to go into treatment and the father to move in with Pamela.
But I should have done more.
But what could you have done?
Ran away with him.
Otis's father was given a lockbox and required to do a weekly urine analysis, but Pamela says it wasn't enough. State and police records show Pamela called CPS repeatedly about the father using drugs, buying urine to fake drug tests, and muffling the child's mouth when he was crying.
Aren't you supposed to do anything and everything? I mean, to try to save them? I mean, I don't understand where that fine line is for them. Why didn't you do something? Why?
Less than 3 weeks after the state decided the father could get custody of him, Otis was found dead. He was in his car seat, left in a bush on a nature reserve. He had meth in his system. Detectives found drugs and paraphernalia on the father. None of it was in the lockbox.
It's beyond heartbreaking. How can you do that to someone? And he deserves so much more.
King 5 spoke to 24 child welfare advocates who were all surprised these lockboxes are part of a safety plan, especially given the death toll associated with fentanyl. From prosecutors,
their solution to that problem is to provide a lockbox as opposed to taking the kid out of the house. That is shocking.
To social workers.
We can't expect a parent who's actively using multiple times a day to remember to safely store their drugs.
Even a mother in recovery and currently using a lockbox says it would be hard to use while on fentanyl.
But like when it comes to fentanyl per se, and that type of drugs, I would have to say, no, they're not good enough because they aren't always used properly.
I have to get them things because their mom can't get them together.
Danielle Steele, whose niece overdosed on drugs last year, says the kids are still living with the parents. She's constantly worried, even with a lockbox.
Children have rights too. They should have rights. And they should have somebody who's looking after them when the parents are not doing it.
No abuse, no drugs, no fear. Keeping kids safe starts right here.
In early February, about 100 foster parents, court-appointed child advocates, and grieving families gathered in Olympia to rally against the Keeping Families Together Act. Grandparents like Danette and John Scott say they warned CPS that their 1-year-old granddaughter, Avril Hope, wasn't safe. 4 months after that call, the baby died of a fentanyl overdose.
She was the sweetest little baby ever. She should have been able to live and grow up with her big sisters.
But mother Jennifer Justice, who came in opposition to the rally, says separating families is too traumatic for parents. Her child was taken away from her by CPS when she was using drugs and says it made her fall deeper into substance use and homelessness. She says keeping families together needs to be the main priority.
When families have the right support, stable housing, treatment, and community, they can heal and thrive. Removing children doesn't solve the root of the problems. It often makes it worse.
As more young children are dying from fentanyl in our state, a specialized center for drug-affected babies sits nearly empty. Child welfare advocates think a state law passed in 2021 is to blame, putting babies in harm's way.
So generally, there's at least 5 drugs in each baby's body.
Barbara Drennan started helping drug-affected babies more than 50 years ago as a foster mom.
And this baby's in the throes of withdrawal, and he's withdrawing from fentanyl and methamphetamines.
In 1990, she founded Kent's Pediatric Interim Care Center, or PIC. The 24/7 nursery was the first of its kind, caring for newborns withdrawing from drugs.
So what does that look like?
Well, you know, what we're seeing is he can't eat. So we have to work pretty hard.
Until recently, infants born with illegal drugs in their system were sent to either foster care or PIC. That's changed.
All these rooms were filled at one time.
Since opening, PIC's cribs were full, caring for up to 20 babies at once.
And today, not so much.
On the day we visited, there were 3 babies total.
We know there's babies out there that need to be here that are not here.
The number of babies coming to PIC started dropping off in 2021.
Senate Bill 5811.
As a new state law was put into practice, the Keeping Families Together Act makes it harder to remove children from their families. And more babies are dying than children in any other age group. In 2023, 67% of children in the state system who died were infants 0 to 12 months old.
It's horrible. It is horrible, and unfortunately, the children don't have any rights.
It's not only child welfare advocates who say these babies need to be at PIC.
This is Georgie.
Parents like Megan Estigoy say this is exactly where her son needs to be. Georgie was born with fentanyl in his system.
Do you think that he should have gone home with you guys?
Honestly, when it comes back to his symptoms and withdrawals, I personally am not trained to do that. But I know for sure here that he would have people that are trained to know what's going on and what he's going through.
Parents are taught how to connect with their infants so they can eventually bring them home.
I wish there was more time with him I could have.
Megan wants to be reunited with her son and is in a recovery program, but she says it's not the drug use holding her back. She's been homeless for years and says that is her biggest barrier.
Not being able to find housing. That way I could take him home.
If Georgie can't be with her, Megan wanted her son to go somewhere trusted, a place she knew firsthand is a lifesaver.
Yes, I was here back in January 1991.
30 years ago, when PIC opened, Megan was one of the first babies in the door.
I feel happy that he's here, that his withdrawals didn't take him from me.
Over the last 3 months, the King 5 investigators have shown the outcry against the state law that makes it harder for CPS to put babies and children in foster care. From prosecutors to foster parents, people are calling for change.
And this is not okay. We have got to get these laws changed and get back on track.
Now the people on the ground, social workers, are weighing in.
It feels awful.
Jeanette Obelts is a supervisor with the Department of Children and Youth Services, or DCYF, and a union representative. She says legislators need to listen to them. Social workers should get more support and have a say when it comes to child safety.
Caseworkers are leaving, and they're leaving because they feel like they can't do their job.
Get you dressed again.
Every time a child dies or nearly dies under the suspicion of abuse or neglect, by law, DCYF must conduct a child fatality review and report the results within 6 months. The problem has gotten so bad, we found DCYF can't keep up with the investigations, a violation of state law.
If your hands are tied, if the legislature is telling you how to keep children safe, what is happening?
We're going to continue to see children die.
It's another reason Barbara wonders, in the midst of a fentanyl epidemic, where are the babies?
Everybody wants to protect the children, but that isn't what's happening today.
DCYF is requesting more money to hire employees to keep up with the death reviews. They're also telling us they don't think the state law is to blame for the increase in deaths. They say the problem sits squarely with the drug epidemic. Over a dozen experts we've interviewed disagree. There's a gap in Washington state law that grieving families say allows people to harm children over and over without being held accountable. I found that law calls for tough penalties when people expose children to meth, but it doesn't include fentanyl, the drug that's killed or nearly killed dozens of children in Washington state.
She was so photogenic. That was her face basically 24/7.
Lily Peden's 2-year-old daughter, Nanette, or Nanny, loved making people laugh.
That was the last one that I took of her. That was the last day that I saw her.
In September 2023, Lily dropped Nanny off at her father's home, thinking she was safe. 5 days later, the toddler died of a fentanyl overdose. Digested fentanyl pills were found in her stomach.
She was 2 years old, a child that was known for putting things in her mouth all the time, everywhere she went.
Nanny is part of a deadly trend impacting infants and toddlers. The King 5 investigators have uncovered multiple cases like this one from Kent, where babies have easy access to fentanyl, where they put the pipes and foil used to smoke the drug in their mouth. The deadly pills can easily be mistaken for candy.
She didn't know any better. It's not... You can't just expect her not to get into it just because it's not hers.
Nanny's father, Evan Hodge, was charged with manslaughter in her death, but child endangerment wasn't part of the case against him. Now, Lily is pushing for change. Currently, the state's child endangerment with a controlled substance law says it's a felony when a child is exposed to meth while it's being manufactured. It does not include exposure to fentanyl, the epidemic gripping the country right now.
The death of a child should be a charge of its own.
Data from the Washington Poison Center shows opioids, including fentanyl, poses a greater danger to children than any other drug. Last year, they found children under 5 were poisoned by opioids 4 times more often than meth, and 20% of the opioid exposures were life-threatening. For all other drug exposures, that number is less than 0.5%.
I don't understand how that's not some form of child endangerment or child abuse already.
Prosecutors say because there isn't accountability for fentanyl exposure, children are left in the same dangerous situations.
Hey, kiddo.
Time and time again.
Hey, buddy.
Police body cam video from 2022 captures first responders waking up this toddler in a Lowe's parking lot in Kent. The parents were found slumped over in their car.
Hi, sir.
Telling police they were smoking blues, which is slang for counterfeit opioids containing fentanyl.
Buddy.
Police were concerned the child kept falling asleep.
He's so tired. That freaks me out, little guy.
So this officer took the toddler to the hospital to get checked out.
I'm gonna be honest with you. You don't deserve to have that child.
Officers were visibly upset.
But you're inside of a car again. Well, he's in the side of a car again, smoking whatever it is that what are you smoking? Blues?
It was the second time in 2 months they'd responded to this car.
And CPS gave him back.
Gave him back?
Yeah.
Drug paraphernalia was found in the car and CPS was called. A little over a year later, it happened a third time. Officers reported seeing an empty baby bottle near the burned oil and blue pill. Police records say the child was okay and CPS was called yet again.
I do think that changing this to a felony would save lives.
Corrine Schneff is with the Pierce County Prosecuting Attorney's Office.
On a vote of 7 ayes and 0 nays, the ordinance is adopted.
Last year, the Pierce County Council led the state by adding accountability when an adult exposes a child to fentanyl. The county went from nothing on the books to making it a gross misdemeanor, the most serious charge a county can levy.
The county council recognized, given the severity of the harm that is caused by this, that it should be a felony. But for now, we at least have a gross misdemeanor charge here in Pierce County that we can use.
Endangerment with a controlled substance is a Class B felony.
In Olympia, bills to close this fentanyl gap haven't made it out of the House, specifically the Community Safety Committee.
And by criminalizing parents, we are separating parents from their children forever, and we don't want to see that.
Representative Roger Goodman is the committee chair. He says the state doesn't want to charge parents, which would separate them from their kids, and that historically, criminalizing drugs disproportionately affects people of color.
Many grieving parents, grandparents tell me it feels like the state is protecting the adult and the child who died is not getting justice, that their life does not matter. What do you say to that?
There have been so many tragic incidences with families and children exposed to these substances. If you're committing a crime, you need to know you're committing the crime. And so many of these people who are suffering from a severe substance use disorder have no idea what's going on. And the question that many of my colleagues have is, do we want to attach criminal liability to someone who is suffering from a substance use disorder, even if someone else may be harmed?
There isn't a moment in the day I'm not thinking about her or wishing I could change what happened. Just like there isn't a night I don't relive waking up and finding her over and over.
At his January sentencing, for the death of Nanny, Evan Hodge received 8.5 years in prison.
How we treat our children says a lot about who we are as a people. Part of this is making sure that this doesn't happen again.
That's exactly what Nanny's mom, Lily, hopes will happen. That no child dies of a fentanyl overdose again.
He made these choices over and over to continue to use. He had multiple people helping him that it's just inexcusable.
There were 3 bills that address adding fentanyl to this child endangerment law, but none of them made it out of the House Safety Committee. At this point, it looks like none of them cleared that first hurdle this session, and the law will likely stay the same. That's it for our special, The Youngest Fentanyl Victims. We'll stay on top of this topic and bring you important developments when they happen. I'm Kristin Goodwillie, and for all of the King 5 investigators, thanks for watching.